In energetic NLP, the goal is always that everybody connects with their own inner wisdom and their own spirit, because that will always be better than what somebody else can tell you or somebody else's ideas. In energetic NLP, I don't want people to believe anything that I'm teaching them. I want them to explore it, and we open up their ability to tap into their own inner wisdom and their own spiritual information.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Hello, Savannah family. Today we have a really special guest. You are going to learn a lot, and I know I learned a lot from Art Giser. He is the creator of Energetic NLP. That stands for Neurolinguistic Programming. He's an internationally renowned NLP trainer, intuitive, and healer. He has a really diverse background because he has this NLP knowledge, but he's also a spiritual coach. He has so much experience with energy work and intuition development, which I thought was really, really cool. And what's really unique is that he actually has a science background. He used to manage a medical research lab for the University of California. Today, he's here to speak to us about what neurolinguistic programming is, what energetic NLP is, and we're also going to talk about karma and spiritual contracts. I know so many of us, myself included, have had the experience of repeating the same negative pattern over and over again, and consciously you know that it needs to shift, that it needs to change. You might even be totally aware of it, but you can't seem to break through. You can't seem to shift the pattern. And this is where a lot of the work that Art does can be really helpful. And I'm so excited because he's going to kind of talk us through how this all works and define a lot of cool terms like spiritual contracts and stuff in this episode. And then on Thursday's episode, he's actually going to take us through an energy clearing meditation. So we're actually going to clear our programming with him. So it's sort of a special meditation episode. So before we dive into all the juiciness, I just want to remind you how you can support the show. Make sure to leave a review here on iTunes. Ratings and reviews here on iTunes mean so much to me. It really helps get the show in front of more people who are like you. I don't know how you found the show, but it's probably likely that you might not have ever found it if it wasn't visible to you in the iTunes and podcast store. And how those podcasts are shown are based on how many ratings or reviews it gets. So I'd love your honest feedback about the show. Please, if you're confused about how to leave a rating or review, you can open the description of this podcast, and we have a link that shows you exactly how to do it. And then the other way you can support is by making a purchase on SavannahSpirit.com. I've mentioned this before, but Savannah Spirit is a family-owned business. I've really enjoyed working with them over the years. Is it years now? They just have beautiful jewelry, crystals, clothing. Check out their stuff if you haven't. And remember that when you make a purchase, you're directly supporting the show. And you can use that coupon code TAKE25 for $25 off anything in your shopping cart if you're a new Savannah Spirit customer. So let's dive into today's conversation with Art Giser.
Art, I'm so glad to have you here. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it. I've been listening to some of your podcasts and I love them, so I'm thrilled to be on the show.
Oh, that's so kind of you to say. I know you're an authority and an expert in not just neurolinguistic programming, NLP, but something called energetic NLP, which is why I was so excited to have you on the show. Let's back up and first, maybe you can just explain to me and the listeners, what is NLP, neurolinguistic programming? What does that mean?
So NLP, as you said, is Neurolinguistic Programming, and we've all hated the developers for that name ever since. But it was started actually in the 70s here in California. And it was, at the time, traditional psychology, people talked about you had to be in therapy for 5 years or more to make a significant deep change. In fact, there's an old Woody Allen movie where he's talking to his girlfriend and he goes, "I've only been in therapy 12 years. And I'm not making fun of that old system, but it was very slow. The people who started NLP knew that there were 5 or 6 therapists who had reputations for doing magical work and getting really rapid, deep, lifelong changes. So they began to study them, and they used tools from something called transformational linguistics and all kinds of other things, and videotape them back in the days when, a videotape machine was the size of a small refrigerator. And out of that developed NLP. And at first, they wanted it primarily as a therapy. But then they realized you could use it therapeutically, but you could also use it to transfer skills. So like if one person is good at something, how would somebody else be good at it? So if you wanted to become a good dancer, you could go to a dance coach who would teach you how to move your body. Well, an NLP dance coach would tell you how to think like a great dancer. And that makes all the difference in the world.
So this may seem like a really basic question, but when we break down what neurolinguistic programming really means, it's sort of just saying like how we talk to ourselves, what thoughts we have about ourselves and our life and what we're saying like internally, like our internal monologue. Is that what you mean?
You might think that, but it's light years beyond that. So one of the early definitions of NLP was the study of the nature of subjective experience. So in NLP, we go, okay, all these things happen in the world, but what makes the difference is what's going on in our mind, consciously and unconsciously. And that's a result of a lot of things that we're not remotely conscious of. So everybody listening to your podcast knows about visualization. Well, in NLP, we take it much further than that. It turns out everybody has a secret coding system. I mean, it's a secret because we're just not consciously aware of it. So if you think of something you believe in, it will be packaged in certain ways. If you think of something you doubt, it will be packaged differently. To give it a comparison, if I was standing 100 feet away from you and I hold up a wine bottle and a soda bottle, even from 100 feet away, you'd know, okay, that's a soda bottle and that's a wine bottle. You wouldn't know what was in them, but you would know the shape of the bottle is a code. Well, how we speak to ourselves, how we visualize our body sensations are actually a whole coding system. And in NLP, we've learned how to discover that coding system and use it. So it becomes like if you could pour soda into the wine bottle, it would actually become wine. And that's just one small part of NLP.
This is cool. Can you give us a practical example of this, even if it's a really kind of dumbed down practical example? Is what you're saying, like if I like these coding or these programmings, it's like I always might react to stress in a very particular way? Is that?
Yeah, and the example of stress, whether people are conscious of the images or not, when people are feeling stress, they're making unpleasant images. And if you get them to be conscious of it, very often they're large and close to your face, so they're overwhelming. And even teaching somebody, okay, move the image back, make it smaller, maybe make it black and white instead of color. And all of a sudden they can go, oh, I can look at that. I can figure out what to do. You know, if you imagine like this huge thing in your face, well, that's more, stress when it becomes overwhelm. Of course, you can't figure it out because there's this huge thing in your face. But literally, if you teach people to move the picture back, make it smaller, maybe make it a little dimmer or less colorful, all of a sudden it becomes something different and they can analyze it and work with it.
And is that what people are doing with you? Like if I came to you for a session, or how is this exactly how you work with clients? Is you're sort of leading them through different visualizations?
It's just one piece of NLP. So it's an important piece of it, but it's a small one. So we work in a lot of different ways in identifying unconscious programming and blocks and habitual ways of thinking. We look at what are the beliefs people have. We use the term presuppositions, that people just assume that they're true, so they never challenge them. And that keeps you locked in a box. So like in my work with people, and I'll get into this more later, a lot of people have the presupposition that only certain people are psychic and are healers, and it's some magical ability only a few people have, when in fact, everybody can do it. But if you believe it's only something a few special people have and you don't have it, then you're never going to develop it. So we look at conscious and unconscious belief structures. We look at what people notice in the world, what they don't, and then how they put it together in their imagery, their body sensations, their internal dialogue. So the NLP is a very big field just in and of itself.
So if we were to work together, this would all come up through us talking together. I'm imagining it would, like, on the surface, might look like talk therapy a little bit.
Well, we're also looking at things like how people's eyes are moving, changing breathing patterns, but yeah, different, not body language in the simplistic way people usually use it, but how people are moving their body. But a lot of it is through the language and what they mention, what they don't mention, the cause effects. And then we have processes to access the unconscious mind so we can surface the things that the person just isn't even consciously aware of.
Very cool. All right. So I think I can visualize or understand a little bit what NLP is and how working with an NLP practitioner, what that might look like. I know you're the creator of what's called Energetic NLP, and you're an intuitive and a healer. So how does that play in and sort of intermingle with what you've told us thus far?
Just so people know, my father was one of the early computer guys. I always wanted to be a scientist. When I grew up, I managed a research lab for one of the top medical research institutions in the world for 11 years. So I have a strong logical part of me, but I also always had this strong mystical part. I was very lucky when I started studying NLP. Everything was very magical. One of the developers became my mentor, and just things just all happened. But I was studying it in Marin County, which is north on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. And there were a number of people in the group that were involved with healing and psychic development and different things. And they began to, and I'd always been interested in it, and I'd studied just a tiny bit, but they began to teach me things and introduce me to teachers. And I found that through the NLP work, I was able to do magical, miraculous work with people. And so were a lot of us. It wasn't just me. And through the energetic work and the spiritual work, I could get magical results with people. And for a long time, I kept them separate. Well, it seemed like a long time to me. And everybody would go, why? In my mind, it was like cheating to do energy work with NLP or something. And particularly when I became a trainer, I felt like, I shouldn't be pulling on these extra skills. Everybody I would mention that to would tell me, you're crazy, like pull it all together, which is what I really wanted to do. So I started realizing, okay, where does NLP work really well, and where is it limited? Where does this spiritual, energetic work really well, and where is it limited? And I began to mix together the best of what I was learning from a number of different teachers and the energy healing side of things, and the best NLP teachers I could get. And out of that was like the birth of energetic NLP.
Well, it's nice that you share that, because I think a lot of us have that sentiment of feeling so conflicted, like having this very strong logical side, but then also having a very strong spiritual practice or sort of mystical side. And it can be really challenging to figure out how do those two things intermingle. And it can almost feel like unsafe to even let those things intermingle. So I think it's really nice that you share that was, a moment of vulnerability for you. It was hard to figure out how to pull it all together. But when you did, that's really when the magic happened.
Well, thank you. And if I could share a quick story, the first really great psychic class I took, it was over a weekend. Our last assignment was you had to write down a question, fold up a piece of paper, get with a partner, and you'd trade papers. You wouldn't read it. You had to hold their paper and answer the questions. So to my amazement, I just told the person what I was getting. And he goes, I actually wrote down 2 questions and you answered both of them in order. So then he's nervous and he starts reading mine. And he goes, you've been walking down this road and you're seeing the road's forks ahead of you. And one side is energetic and spiritual and mystical. And the other side is science and logic. And you're going, and you've been going, which one do I choose? Which one do I choose? And he goes, you're now at the fork in the road and you finally realize there isn't any fork. And I went, oh my God, that's exactly what's going on in my life now.
That's so cool. I love it. So you've told us about the NLP side of things. So now tell us about this more mystical energy healing side. So, I mean, you just mentioned kind of this class that sounded very cool. When you talk about energy work or healing, what does that look like for you in the context of working with a client? Because I know there's so many different ways that people practice energy healing.
And let me just say, I mean, there's a lot of people doing really wonderful work out there. And there's a number of things about energetic NLP that are very unique. So for one, when I train people, right at the beginning, they have to take the energetic NLP pledge. And the energetic NLP pledge is that they won't believe anything that I tell them. Because I've taken something from in NLP, we talk about we don't believe our ideas in NLP, we explore them and we keep evolving them and improving them. Well, in energetic NLP, the goal is always that everybody connects with their own inner wisdom and their own spirit, because that will always be better than what somebody else can tell you or somebody else's ideas. In energetic NLP, I don't want people to believe anything that I'm teaching them. I want them to explore it. And we open up their ability to tap into their own inner wisdom and their own spiritual information. And one thing I discovered years ago is that often people in the areas of their life that they weren't satisfied or were unhappy, they didn't have what we've later named whole being permission. So I'd be reading somebody and I'd realize their spirit wanted something, their soul wanted something else, their conscious mind wanted something else, their unconscious mind was conflicted, and their body might want yet another thing. So energetic NLP, one of the goals is always to get whole being permission, whole being alignment, and whole being congruence. So that a person's spirit, their soul, their conscious mind, their unconscious mind, their body are all aligned in what they're trying to create and manifest in your life. And when you do that, then things just open up incredibly. So that's that. You go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, this whole being permission sounds really interesting, and I'm wondering, how does someone know, or how could someone even listening to this podcast know where they're not giving themselves permission to do something that they really want to do? Like, how does that investigation take place?
Great question. So some of the ways you would know is that identifying the parts of your life that aren't satisfactory to you. Again, either they're okay, but they're not where you deeply inside feel they could be, or they're not working well for you at all. So that's one clue. There'll almost always be a lack of whole being permission there. And whole being permission also ties into karma and spiritual contracts, which I can circle back to. But there'll be something off in one of those. Another way is if somebody has an emotional state that they have too frequently or they don't handle well, that's another sign of a lack of whole being permission. So like if somebody goes, I'm anxious all the time, I don't even know why, or I get angry a lot, or I'm frustrated, or I'm depressed, or, and of course there can be organic and other causes for things, but anywhere there's an ongoing emotional state that either you don't handle well, or you go, I don't even know why I feel this so often. And there's people in great relationships who are jealous all the time and have no need to be. So things like that are a sign that something is off in one of those categories: the spirit, the soul, the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, the body, karma, spiritual contracts.
So there's a discongruency somewhere, basically.
Yeah, discongruency. And again, for people listening, if you think of some area of your life where you go, so if it's an area of your life that you're not satisfied with, but you've never tried to improve it, I would even look there. But definitely if I get a lot of people in my programs say, I've learned all this great stuff and I've taken all these workshops and I've read all these books. Why can't I change this? At least a 90% clue that there's a lack of whole being permission and congruence.
And then how does the karma piece tie in? Because I'm guessing, I think having had so many incredible people on the show, one thing that I've learned is that we do have stuff like in our programming. Like you can think of it just as traits you've inherited from your family, that your parents have inherited from their grandparents, or you can take it as far as like past lives. When you're stuck in a way that you're like, wow, I've worked on this and worked on this, but it's still not clearing, or I'm still struggling, or I'm still jealous, even though I'm in this great relationship. Something about karma coming in there. Tell us about that.
Very likely. The way I separate out personally what I would call programming from karma. So people have programming on an energy, not just on an unconscious level, but on an energetic level, that it starts when you're in the womb. Your parents don't know it. Even if you never knew your father and mother, they were programmed to program any children they had. And that programming isn't even just from them, it's ancestral. So there's ancestral programming, family programming that's occurring on an energetic level. That can very much relate to karma and spiritual contracts. But to me, what I call karma is a little different than that. So we do a tremendous amount of work in Energetic NLP about clearing out energetic programming. And that opens a lot of things up. But if you have karma that won't allow you to clear that or open it, then you work on karma. So I've been blessed to have 2 empowerments from the Dalai Lama, and I like his definition of karma. And there's many, many different ways people think of it, but the way he thinks of it is what I, at least du jour, like, which is karma has nothing to do with reward or punishment, like zero, nothing. It's just cause and effect. Everything you've done, everything you've thought, even in past lives, ripples through time. In Energetic NLP, we work on, I hope this is helpful. I think of it like we're in different spiritual cages. And I'm not using the word cages because they're bad or wrong or somebody's doing it to us, but that's the way they operate. So karma is like this huge spiritual cage that limits what's possible for you. A little lower than that are the spiritual contracts. Under that are what I would call unconscious and or energetic programming. We look at all of those different levels.
So tell us about the spiritual contracts before we keep going, because I think we need to define that so we can understand the whole picture. I love everything you're sharing. It's so interesting.
Well, thanks. And thank you. Yes. And again, there's a lot of ways you can define these. And I like to try to, and I'm known for trying to make things simple in my work. So the idea of spiritual contracts, and you can get more complicated than this, But then on the level of either your spirit or the level of your soul, you made agreements. And those agreements have been in other lifetimes. They could have been in other lifetimes. It could have been before you were born, when you weren't in anybody, and they could have happened after you were born. And they're like any other kind of contract in life. They're agreements about what we are and aren't going to do, or what we can and can't have with people. So the first time I was exposed to them, I had a wonderful teacher named John Norman, who's now deceased. And this was back in the 80s. And he was going, you have all these spiritual contracts back when you were a Catholic monk, and their vows of poverty. Would you like me to clear them up for you? And I'm going, please, I'm not a monk this lifetime. So they can be from past lives. They can be something from between lives. They can be something in this life. So everybody listening to this, you have contracts with at least your immediate family. You have contracts. They can be with religions, with groups, with societies, with countries. Again, they can be from another lifetime. And they, like any contract, they're not good or bad, but they're designed to limit what's possible. So we have some very, very unique ways that we work with spiritual contracts in energetic NLP that are different than anybody else I've seen. And I'm not saying other people's ways aren't great. They are. But I think what we do goes far beyond anything I've ever seen.
Wow. So there's a lot to unpack here. Let's start I'm like, where do I want to dive in first? So let's keep this really practical for folks, because I think everyone has something they're working on right now, right? Especially it's January, it's the new year, like people have probably made resolutions. They have things they want to shift and change. So one of the things that you had mentioned was to clear out energetic programming. So I feel like the first step for folks might be to clear the things they are aware of, right? Before we start digging into some of these deeper layers where we might have like spiritual contracts or programming that we're not aware of, right? So I wrote down when you said clear energetic programming, because I thought that sounded so cool, and I was visualizing like a ceremony or something, but I'm sure you can break it down. Like, what does that actually look like? Does that look like someone doing some journaling work? Does it look like, doing movement, writing, visualization? If we want to clear some energetic programming that's not serving us, for example, jealousy or, poverty, lack, something like that, how do you suggest people go about doing that?
Fantastic question. So a couple of things. One is, there's a lot of huge values in journaling and other conscious processes. For energetic programming, you can do a lot of the work going beyond your consciousness. So in energetic NLP, we created a term we call your miraculous self. And that's when your inner wisdom and your spirit are working together. The reason we want them working together is the spirit has that vast perspective on everything, but it's almost like the perfect parent going, whatever you want, dear. You want to have great love. That's wonderful. You want to be lonely. Well, it's giving you great amount of permission in life, where your inner wisdom is human and it's able to go to your spirit. Like, I know it's all good to you, but from down here, I have some strong preferences about how it's going to work. So we always put them in charge. And when they're in charge and working together, we made up a term for that we call your miraculous self, or your M. And I am getting to your question. So in energetic NLP, we always have the person put their M, their miraculous self, their inner wisdom and spirit in charge of what happens. So you don't have to consciously analyze it. Now, sometimes you do, but that's if you consciously believe it too, then you definitely need to look at it consciously, if that makes sense. But if it's just unconscious programming, you don't actually. So a lot of people have a programming that they're not worthy. And if you ask them consciously, they'd go, I know I'm worthy, but I don't feel worthy. So you know what I mean? And
so how do you fix that?
So it's actually easy, and it's easy to take people through. It's not as easy to explain. And it's one of the things that I train people to do for other people. And we train people in how to clear their own energy and how to clear this themselves. And I'd be happy, we need a bit of time, but I'd be happy to talk with people about ways to do it that are real simple.
Well, maybe we could do a little piece of it in Thursday's episode.
That would be fantastic. So there's a simple, powerful process people can do, again, by putting their inner wisdom and spirit in charge and just energetically clearing these. So I would love to do that on Thursdays.
I'm excited because I feel like you've introduced some really cool, powerful concepts here, but I can definitely tell that what you're talking about as like a guided experience, something that you'd take something through, is going to be so much better served by giving us a little taste of it rather than continuing to try to explain it in words. Let's just experience it. So, Savannah family, we're going to come back on Thursday, and you guessed it, we are going to experience this technique and do a little bit of energetic clearing with art. So make sure to tune in to Thursday's episode, and I'd love to hear from you. What learnings, takeaways, questions do you have from this conversation? I hope that you'll listen on Thursday and make some time and space in your week or weekend to actually do this process with us. This is really a potent and powerful time of year to be doing this work in January, right at the start of the new year. And maybe if you're still working on some of those intentions and resolutions, this could maybe really help. So we'll connect with you on Thursday, and thanks so much for being here and for listening, and from my heart to yours, namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.